Good morning, good morning. It's another Conversations with Compassion. It's me, Helen Ferguson. If you don't know me, I'm Helen, obviously, and I'm a specialist trauma therapist for high-performing entrepreneurial professional business women who have a trauma history of childhood trauma, relational trauma, and developmental trauma. And so I work with them to rediscover who they are and help guide them to a place of safety emotionally and psychologically so that they can not just do the success, but be themselves and be their authentic self. And I set up Conversations with Compassion because I hear from so many women, and I was hearing from so many women, that self-compassion is lazy, it's self-indulgent, it's narcissistic, it's ego, there's no place for it, there's no time for it, quote unquote. And I actually kind of destigmatize that in the room with women around, actually self-compassion sheds the shame. And it's a real powerful, empowering process in a healing journey. And so I wanted to bring, I can say that, but I wanted to bring women into the conversation with me, amazing, incredible women, inspiring women to share their experience of self-compassion. So it starts to change the narrative for women and for an embracing of that. So I am joined this morning. I'm so pleased. I love Joanna. And I'm so pleased that Joanna's agreed to come on and talk to me this morning. I've been waiting for this one for ages. so Joanna, please take a moment to introduce yourself and then we'll get the conversation started.
Fabulous, thank you. And I too have been waiting for this and really looking forward to it. So it's wonderful. And I can see some people already commenting to say hi, which is lovely. So yeah, I'm Joanna. Usually only Joanna when I'm in trouble, but do you know how hard it is to say Jo Rawbone? It's like chewing a wasp. So when it's my full name, it's Joanna Rawbone. The rest of the time I'm just Jo. And I've been a coach, trainer, facilitator since the late 80s, and it's my passion. I love what I do. And it's only in the last 5 years or so that I've really niched into an area where we need more compassion. And that's the whole area of introversion and shifting the extroversion bias. So hence my business, Flourishing Introverts. And that's what I'm really focused on right now.
It's a wonderful focus. I love your focus. I love listening to you talking about it and the area of work that you're in. I want to start the conversation, if it's okay, with asking you what self-compassion means for you. What's your experience of it? How does it manifest in your mind and in yourself?
Do you know, I had to do a bit of reflection as an introvert. Of course, I had to do a bit of reflection about this because I knew you were going to ask me this, so I had to be ready for it. And what it comes down to for me is kindness. Mm-hmm. And kindness is one of the words that's often used about me. So apparently I show kindness to other people quite readily. And the one person who was always bottom of that list was me in terms of showing kindness to me. And it's one of the things I really had to learn to do was I had to learn how to live alongside in a relatively amicable but adult way my inner critic, because my inner critic was the part of me that was really keen on judging me and making sure that actually I was light on kindness for myself. I could be kind to everyone else, but actually, and I think I've heard in a couple of your other conversations with Compassion, people talking about somehow it feels selfish, or, it feels self-indulgent somehow to have that self-compassion. But it was only when I really started to understand my inner critic and what makes her tick that I was able to negotiate in a way that I could have that, I could show myself that compassion, that kindness, and not actually feel bad about it, not feel guilty about it. And that's then part of what I do with my introverted clients. I help them get to know their inner critic as well, so that they too can find the right balance and ditch the judgment about things, really.
I think that's where your work and my work is very similar in that sense, because that's exactly what I do. And in the first couple of sessions with women, they kind of get a little bit angry with me because they're like, why am I focused on this inner critic where I'm here to do this, 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 this? And I thought we were going to go this direction. And I say, actually, before we can start anything, we need to understand what's happening up here. What's the words that you're using? Where are they coming from? What's the tone of voice? What is that narrative?
Yeah.
And whose is it? Whose voice it actually is it? Because when we start to understand, when we start to be more aware of that voice and, like you say, work alongside it, kind of truly start to understand it, and then also make a decision about whether it can stay, because that's equally a choice. You know, we have a choice with all of this too, to say that's not true. That's not the way I want to think about myself. That's not my tone of voice. It's not the way that I would speak to anybody else. So that inner critic work is crucial. And that's where I think you and I are very similar in that sense.
Absolutely. And because I don't have the kind of clinical background that you do, I guess I come at it from quite a different angle. And I
think frozen.
Okay, am I here? Am I back again?
You're back again. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Tech issues were always going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, because I don't have a clinical background, I think I come at it from quite a different angle, in that for me, it's one of my sub-personalities, it's one of my parts. And I think because I'd spent decades trying to shut my inner critic up, and what I realized was the more I told it to shut up, the louder it yelled in my ear. And I realized there must be a different way. And so for me, meeting my inner critic, you know, in my case, it is a she. Her name's Gladys. She looks like a cross between Dobby the house elf and Gollum. So if you can imagine those huge watery eyes, very waxy, pale skin, completely terrified. And one of the things that really helped me was to understand what she was terrified of, because for me, an inner critic, the messages of an inner critic is usually to keep me safe. To keep me safe from what?
Yeah.
And for me as an introvert, what my inner critic Gladys was tending to do was to keep me playing so small that actually I wasn't doing the work that I knew I could do. I wasn't being the person I knew I could be. And so getting to know what it is that she was so fearful of, what the fear in those eyes is all about, I find then that I can acknowledge, I can say, oh, interesting message. Actually, we're okay, Gladys, we've got it this time. Because every now and again, something she does say is like, blimey, you're right, I should pay attention to that. So I've decided I don't want to kind of ditch her altogether. What I want her to do is to know that she's okay, she's safe, and that she can speak up, and I'm not going to tell her to shut up. And then actually what I have to balance that is my inner advocate, who's the best gatekeeper I can ever have of my inner critic. So I come at it from quite a different angle, but a way that seems to work for me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, listening to that, I can completely visualize. Okay, I can see Gladys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it like you say, it's about having a relationship with that voice. It's about understanding it, being aware of it, absolutely understanding that it often comes from a place of fear and anxiety.
Yeah.
And when you start to understand that, when you start to appreciate what that fear or anxiety is, why is it trying to keep you safe? Because that's what anxiety does. Anxiety is trying to keep you safe. So the inner critic is doing that, has a role in doing that as well. I think there are other parts of the inner critic which are also about keeping you small, you know, not allowing I'm going to use some client words: not allowing liberation, not allowing freedom,
Yeah.
not allowing flourishing.
Yeah.
It keeps you small. It keeps you from not showing up for yourself in the way that you want to, because of fear of
Yeah.
judgment, fear of failure, fear of not being successful, fear of what people will say, fear of getting it wrong. One thing I always say to my clients is, you're going to get it wrong, because we're human.
Absolutely.
We're human. We're going to get it wrong. And what we just do is we learn from that and we grow from that. And that's why self-compassion is also massively important as a growth mindset. Because once we start to understand and be kind to ourselves and use that inner critic and that voice and listen to it and then learn from it, we go into a growth mindset that means that we are not going to play small. We're not going to keep ourselves in the corner. I think of that Dirty Dancing film. It's where he says, keep baby in the corner. It's that, we can move out of the corner. We can move out of the darkness. And actually step powerfully into ourselves.
Yeah. And all of those things you talked about in terms of, playing small, I've heard all of those messages and I've complied with them over the decades. And now I have experienced that freedom, that liberation. And I'm still just kind of monitoring. Just because, as I say, every now and again, there is something that's like, yeah, do you know what? That's not a bad shout. Let me just spend a bit more time thinking about that. But what I don't let it do is almost have me confined in some kind of prison. Because that was the other thing I really realized is that my inner critic was very good at keeping me playing so small that I was then in a like what felt like a self-imposed prison cell. And so being liberated, being free from that prison cell for me was extraordinary, was really remarkable.
Every single woman that I've worked with, when they get to that place, that it feels is liberating. What it feels is just, this sense of euphoria.
Yes.
And I recall a lady called Michelle who is going to come on to Conversations with Compassion with me before Christmas. And, she's bravely coming into this conversation after working with me one-to-one. So, and I remember her saying in her final session with me, I can't describe the feeling, but I feel light. I feel like, there's a light, there's a luminescence, and I think that's extraordinary. And part of all the work that she did and what we're talking about now is about not staying in the darkness, not keeping ourselves small, and embracing a process by which we can step confidently into our self-worth and our value and our courage. And our vulnerability, stepping into our vulnerability is hugely important in that.
Yeah, agreed entirely.
I'm just going to read a couple of comments because there's been actually lots coming in, but Emma's saying, I could listen to you all day. This makes so much sense. My inner critic never stops. Wish she would stay quiet sometimes. Emma, I invite you to start having a conversation with her.
Yes.
I invite you to start just gently having a conversation with your inner critic and start understanding where she's coming from, what place is she coming from, why is she saying the things that she's saying, okay, as a starting point. So I invite you to do that. And Polly's saying externalizing is so powerful. It absolutely is. And visualizing, externalizing and visualizing, so you're having a conversation outside of yourself slightly. And Emma's back with, needed to listen to this today. Totally resonated with this so much. I think it resonates with so many people, Emma, and Polly, and I know Dawn's watching, and Sarah is with us as well. And, it resonates with so many women. And this is why these conversations are massively important, because we need to start allowing ourselves to be. We need to start allowing ourselves to come out of the shadows of fear. And that's that my work is all about doing that. My work is all about, any trauma work is about empowering through a process of stepping away from fear and feeling much more internally and psychologically safe. And that's, you know, that's what self-compassion does. It's incredibly empowering. But Joanna,
that's why your work, I was going to say, that's why your work is so needed as well, Helen. And thank you on behalf of womankind. Thank you for doing the work you do.
Oh, thank you. I absolutely love what I do. People often say to me, do you not get exhausted by it emotionally and psychologically? Do I not get exhausted by it? I'm not going to lie, yes, but I also have lots of structures in place that allow me to be able to reflect and I actually go through my own healing as well. So I have a wonderful, long-standing friend for over 30 years, and I go to her for some holistic healing when I feel full of, because I kind of consider myself a bit of a vessel for women, so that you know I hold and contain those emotions, so that they're able to think about them in a different way. So I do sometimes get very full, and so I know myself well enough. I will then have a session with Mandy, and I will have a very holistic healing, a crystal healing process with her. So it's lovely. But Joanna, do you think that there was a pivotal moment in time, experience that made you recognise that self-compassion needed to be more welcome into your life?
Absolutely. And the time, and I can't remember the exact year, but it's going to be around 2002, 2003, something around that time. I'd been working as, I'm a trainer, coach, facilitator, as I say, been doing that since 1987. And I'd been working as an associate of an international training development organization. And although I was self-employed, I'd been given the responsibility of actually managing client relationships, of developing some of our associates. So I had all of the downsides of employment and very few of the upsides of self-employment. And worse than that, in my industry, a lot of the lauded trainers are extroverts. So they're the ones that have people rolling around the aisles, having a wonderful time, laughing all the time. And I'm a much more serious trainer. So I can be funny, but I don't inject humor. I'm not one of those who puts on the ground rules of a training course and we're going to have fun, because it's like, well, that's really subjective, actually. So how can I guarantee that? And I was away on holiday in France, as it happens, and down near Carcassonne, I think. And I was coming to the end of a very busy period, and I was out on the evening walk with my husband, and I turned to him and I said, I can't do this anymore. And judging by the look of horror on his face, I think he thought I meant the marriage. And what I actually meant was, I can't carry on being in this organization surrounded by extroverts, because I'd spent so much of my time and energy pretending to be more like them in order to be accepted, in order to get on, in order to be seen as a great trainer. And I knew there was something fundamentally wrong with that. And in essence, what I did was I hit burnout. I hit introvert burnout. And for me, there's a very natural process from overwhelm. And if I don't look after my needs at overwhelm, I then go into introvert hangover. If I don't recharge properly at that point, I'm then into my introvert burnout. And that's where I got to. I think it was only the second time in my life, but it was the biggest burnout. And so that was September when I made the call back to the managing partner. By October, I was at home thinking, right, now I need to make sure that I've got my own business running, because of course I'd given so much to this other organization that I didn't have my own stream of clients, my own pipeline. And I sat in front of my computer till about January the 15th. and I couldn't do anything. It's not that I
Mm.
didn't have the motivation. I was at that point of burnout where, despite my best efforts,
Yeah.
I could do nothing.
Yeah.
And it was at that point that I really understood the toll that lack of self-compassion,
Mhm.
that buying into almost the, and it was a kind of sense of shame of I wasn't good enough, I wasn't like them. And the toll it took on me, I thought, this is wrong, this has to change.
Mhm.
And so from that moment on, and it was very slowly, slowly, very tentatively, started finding and feeling my way through to self-compassion. And I'm still not great at it, Helen. I have to work really hard at it because I
Yeah.
can get so busy. And like
Yeah.
you, I've got clients who kind of, who need me to do stuff,
Mhm.
and I get to the bottom of the pile again.
Yeah.
So I know that this is a quite a long journey for me, this
Mm.
self-compassion. It's not something that's come naturally, and it's not something that I readily kind of slip into. I have to remind myself to go there again.
Yeah. Self-compassion, I believe, is an ongoing, continuing journey. Anyway, I don't think
Yeah.
there's a time at which we reach ultimate self-compassion and then that's it.
No.
We've got it forever. Because there are so many things, let's call them triggers, that will bring you back
Mm,
to a different space, to a different
mm,
place, to a place that it's perhaps a struggle to find that compassion, to bring that compassion in. And my story actually resonates with yours as well. My because I went through an emotional burnout, being in a very busy mental health environment in the NHS, and very pressured
mm,
environment. And my therapy work I was doing that alongside the managerial side.
mm.
But similarly, walking on Dartmoor with my husband, and I just kind of went. I started laughing at something, and he said, "I can't remember the last time I heard you laugh."
Oh, wow.
And so we then sat on a tour on Dartmoor with the dog, and just talked through what needed to happen. And it took me a
Mm,
year. I gave up that work, and it took me a year to recover from that, and to bring self-compassion in, and to understand that that's what was missing. So I always consider it, and listening to you, is it will ebb and flow. It
yeah.
will, there are times where it will shine, and
Yeah.
there are times when the light is dimmed, and that's when we need to recognize what we need to do in those moments. So how we bring it back.
Mm,
And that kind of, leads on about, the hurdles that we have to go over and go through in order to make sure that we don't forget that it's there, that it's an incredibly empowering process for us,
mm.
and that we shouldn't just let it drift, So your hurdles are I use the term triggers because it's a daily term for me,
Yeah.
but that your hurdles are those triggers, I think.
Mm. And I think busyness is one of the biggest for me. Whilst I know that busy isn't, the be all and the end all,
No.
when I'm running my own business, as as your audience here are, there's that whole sense of, if there's a gap in the day, I ought to squeeze something else into it, as opposed to squeeze some self-compassion into it.
Exactly. Yeah. There is no badge of honor for busy.
Indeed.
It's, and I hear the term all the time, and that's why, like I said at the beginning, that's why I set these conversations up, because I hear I'm too busy for self-compassion, and I think, my God, why are we saying these words?
Yeah.
Why are we saying those words, that we're too busy for ourselves?
Mm,
That's painful. That, because we're wired for compassion, that I get emotional when I hear women saying that, I'm too busy for myself.
mm.
You know?
And
And
and we all know and use that analogy of, the oxygen mask on the plane, and you put somebody else's on, you put your own on first before you help somebody else. So we can all spout that stuff,
yeah,
but when it comes to actually living it, that's where the challenge often can be, I find.
yeah, it is. That's the biggest hurdle.
Mm,
That's
mm,
the biggest hurdle, is actually welcoming it in. and
Yeah, because
embracing it as a new friend.
it's not that we don't know what to do. It's
Mm.
that actually there's something that kind of stops us in our tracks, and that's the bit I'm always interested in, actually, in terms of, what is it? Because it isn't always the inner critic, it's something else. So what is it that actually stops me from being kind to myself in this moment?
Yeah. And that's a crucial, crucial question. What's stopping me from being kind to me in this moment? It's almost like I want people to have that on a fridge. I want it on a mug. I want it on a because that's what we should be asking. That's what we should be asking, not trying to fill the space with something else that's about validation. Because sometimes and often, we do things because we're seeking validation,
Yeah.
and actually that validation needs to come from ourselves. So maybe what's stopping us from being kind in this moment is that we don't see that self-compassion is validation. We see the busyness, we see the doing as the gratification and validation for who we are and what we're doing.
And that's so interesting, isn't it? Because that's almost like, what's our measure of success? Is it how many hours I'm working? Is it the money in the bank? Is it, the material things I have? Or is it that inner sense of knowing that actually I'm okay, I'm good?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think what I need to do, and I can't speak for anybody else, obviously, but what I need to do is remind myself of my definition of success, and that it's not about, how many follow me on Instagram, because actually not many do, because that's not my thing, or, how many in my group, or, how many on my program. It's actually, how am I?
Yes. Huge. That's huge. That's a massive message. That's such
Yeah.
an inspiring message. We've got Julie Smith. Julie, hi, Julie. Good morning. She's saying that she can relate to this, and I think absolutely, so many women will relate to what we've been talking about so far, and that statement that you just made there. In terms of how you use self-compassion, how you
Yes.
not the right word, but in the work that you do now, with your clients, with the businesses that you work with, how do you balance it? How do you both give compassion in those moments? Because my own experience of the NHS at that time, for me, for example, was that there was no compassion.
Yeah.
There was compassion outwards, of course, to clients and everything else, but actually as a structure, there's no compassion, and it's very difficult, I think, to bring that into a corporate kind of thinking about, compassion should be there.
Yeah.
But equally kind of and that obviously I'm talking about something that's very different to your client base, but where does it factor into how you work?
This is so interesting, because this is where I can give myself a hard time every now and again, because my capacity for compassion, even showing it for other people, seems to be somewhat dependent on my mental and emotional battery level. And I know that if I, depending on where I'm working, who I'm working with, I have more or less ability to show compassion, which isn't ideal. Fortunately, I'm not in your line of work. Otherwise, I'd be a terrible therapist, right? But there's something really interesting here about that's the reminder to me that I need to keep my mental and emotional batteries topped up in order to be able to show appropriate levels of compassion with my clients and be able to show myself that self-compassion. Because the thing that gets in the way for me, and this is where working with corporate clients is maybe slightly different, is that I expect and want to encourage a degree of or a degree of people being responsible for themselves and their own action, a degree of them being accountable, rather than always saying it's somebody else's fault, it's them, it's out there, it's the business, it's the organization. because I think a lot of the work I do is also about encouraging reflection, because I think we've lost, and I'm saying lost, I don't know that we ever valued it, actually, whether we ever had it, but we don't seem to value thinking time and reflection time in organizations. It's back to that busyness thing, because I think if people did or would do that, they'd start to then recognize that they have a part to play in things. And then what we can do is engage the self-compassion to say, and to err is human. You know, we are going to make mistakes. And as you said earlier, what do we learn from those, so that we keep that growth mindset engaged as often as possible, rather than then just retreating back in and licking our wounds. So this is a very tricky area for me in my work, because certainly, as I say, my capacity for it is dependent on my own level, my own battery, my level of charge in my batteries.
Yeah. And that is the same for
Okay.
a lot of people. Yeah.
I thought I was going to get, roasting at that point.
No, it's the same. We have to feel that we're in a place to be able to provide it. And you say, you'd make a rubbish therapist. Therapists develop, and lots of people actually working with compassion, working with people, can develop compassion fatigue. Think of it as a spectrum. It's, the most raw end of the scale of that is literally not being able to deliver the work that you're doing, and experiencing that emotional burnout. But as a spectrum, we do, because we're human and we're working with humans, we will experience some level of kind of compassion fatigue or compassion withdrawal, because we're not in a place of being able to provide it for ourselves, and don't have the energy to deliver that for other people, to reciprocate that rather with other people. And especially if we're not experiencing it from them either, that's the thing. If you're if you're in what feels like a constant battle of trying to get people to to reflect, to think, and that kind of resistance will mean that your battery levels go lower.
Absolutely. And I experience that very regularly working with my corporate clients, and it's one of the reasons that I'm choosing to do less work with the corporate clients, where people are put in front of me whether they want to be there or not, and choosing to do more work with people who've chosen to do the work that I'm offering. And I imagine that's so rewarding for you, because people are working with you because they've chosen to. It doesn't make it easy.
No.
The work is no easier, but actually that there's something, actually they're invested in it in a way which often the work I do with corporates is that the people aren't invested. And of course that just depletes my compassion capacity even further, actually.
And it is true to say that does happen for me too, because I can give an example of that. I recently, because I don't advertise it so well, but I train professionals who are working with traumatized children and abused children to emotionally and psychologically respond to to the children's needs. So it's what I do is I describe it as I teach them a different language. I teach them the language, an emotional language by which they can respond to those children, and I deliver that to. I'm commissioned by Children and Family Services in the UK to do that. And I was delivering this, I think it was end of September, I was delivering this to a group of professionals, and a mixed group of professionals all working in that field. And I could feel the resistance. I could absolutely feel the resistance. Not from everyone. There was a bit of shock, actually, because it's a very intense subject and it's very hard to describe it and define it. And I was kind of saying, this is not something in your toolbox. You have to live and breathe it.
Yeah.
And so, it was like, oh gosh, we've got to change ourselves. But there were a group that were absolutely invested in being there. They wanted to be there. They wanted to learn. They wanted to really incorporate this, and they got so much out of it the first day that they came back and said, I've changed, I did something different. And the child then disclosed to me, and I was like, oh my God, there we go. And that's amazing. That's safety. And yet there was some that, they were quite obvious with their resistance, the eye rolling and stuff like that. And that, I got to, I think, the lunchtime, and I could feel myself getting riled by this. Because what I was thinking was, you're spoiling it for these people that are really, if you don't want to be here, then leave,
And I have said that in the past in group.
and I thought, and I spoke to one of the delegates on, who was a supervising social worker. So I said to her, I'm really struggling with these particular women because I'm really passionate about sharing this. And it's amazing, it's an amazing training. Even if I do say so myself, it's an amazing training. And so, I was thinking, stop spoiling it for other people if you're not wanting to be here. And I found myself then responding to that. So I went off and had in the break, and I just went off and I had a bit of time with myself, and I thought, okay, let's just give them the option to go. So I went and had a conversation with them, and I said, I think you've been asked to come here today rather than choose to come. So I wonder whether you would prefer that your time was elsewhere. Or do you want to give yourself the opportunity to learn something different that helps the children that you're looking after, that are living with you? I said, that's your choice, because you always have a choice. And they stayed. And actually, the second day, they gave much more of themselves. And I think it came from that resistance was they felt they didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
So my compassionate response was, I'm giving you the choice.
Yeah.
And so I think when we do that, when we meet resistance with compassion and we meet resistance with providing choice, then we have a very different response from people.
And that's something that I definitely could deploy more often. Sorry, I'm just going to sneeze, which isn't particularly good, is it?
It's okay.
Or maybe not. Yeah. Of course, as soon as you think you are, it's gone.
It's gone.
That's certainly something that I could deploy more often, because in the past I absolutely have said, you don't need to be here. If you don't want to be here, then feel free to go. But I think I've used it in quite a combative kind of way.
Yeah.
I haven't used it with compassion. So that is something I'm definitely going to use in the future. So thank you, Helen.
That's all right. I'm glad I could share it. I'm glad I could share that experience. I'm very aware of the time now, and I could talk to you all day. I say that every week with women, because I think, and particularly you, Jo, it's this has been an absolutely incredible conversation and inspiration for so many women out there listening and watching on replay, watching on YouTube, and all the stuff, all the tech. What would you, I'm throwing this question in, and I realize I didn't let you know that I might ask it. What would be, I think you've already said it in the conversation, but what would your one strong piece of advice be today for somebody listening who is struggling with welcoming compassion and self-compassion into their life?
I think it would be to recognize that until you do, your ability to take your place in the world and be who and how you want to be is severely restricted. It's kind of limited. So I think it would be absolutely to welcome it and find the different ways that is going to work for you as compassion. So I have a number of different ways depending on how I'm feeling and what feels right. So it isn't like there's one thing that, that I trot out that is my bit of self-compassion. So, sometimes it's putting on loud music and dancing like a loony. And sometimes it's walking in nature, and sometimes it's taking a long bath, and sometimes it's writing a gratitude journal, or going through bits of feedback that people have given me that helps me realize that actually you know, what I do is really appreciated. There are a whole raft of things, but what I'm really good at doing now is saying, what is it I need right now? And going and doing that rather than just doing anything. It's like,
Yeah.
what do I need right now? And doing that. So I would say, generate yourself a little list, a basket of things that, you know, that self-compassion could look like for you, and pick something out that's going to work in that moment.
Brilliant. Perfect. I love that.
Thank you.
I love that. Emma has been saying, it's been so lovely listening to you both. Polly said she could listen all day. I think perhaps we need to do a day at some point. And I know that Julie, I just want to go back to her comment because I think it was a nice one to share. Julie, hello, Julie. It's nice to see you here. I know, Julie. Wouldn't it be wonderful if all businesses dedicated time to meditation and breathing and absolutely, you know, I think
it would
be. I think we've got a long way to go for that, but it would be lovely. Joanna, where can people find you if they want to connect with you, want to hear more about what you do, and also, you know, are thinking about working with you? Where would they find you?
There's a one-stop shop really, which is my website, which is flourishingintroverts.com. You'll find my quiz there in terms of understanding what type of introvert you are. You'll find my TEDx talk there, which is about shifting the extroversion bias to unlock the potential of introverts. You'll see articles that I've had published in a variety of journals, and even some downloadables, I think they're my irregular musings. So all sorts of things can be found under that one roof.
Perfect. That's wonderful. And I know so many women will have been inspired by today's conversation.
Oh, thank you.
I noticed that Emma's saying that she's going to start with self-compassion today. I'm going to take a long bubble bath after this. That's lovely. If you are watching this and you are somebody who's struggling with shame and wanting to start that shift to self-compassion, I do have a free download on my website, www.helenbferguson.com, which will start you on that journey to self-compassion. And I also have a free group, The Heart of Healing Alchemy, for professional, entrepreneurial, high-performing women, where it's a new group. I shot my old one, but it's a new group. And there are lots of prompts coming in there around self-compassion and self-awareness and self-acceptance. So if anybody's watching and they want to be part of that group, you are more than welcome to come in. But Joanna, thank you. Huge gratitude for today. I have loved this conversation, and I'm so pleased that you gave the time to me to do this.
It's been my absolute pleasure, and I've been inspired, and I am inspired by what you do. So it's been a real joy for me to be here in conversation with you, Helen. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's end it there and leave everybody with feeling inspired. So I will see everyone next week. If you're watching on replay, please just give a hashtag replay on this. And if you've got another comment, I will respond to them, and please ask me anything. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you again, Joe, for being here with me. And I look forward to next week when we have Emma, not Emma Holt, but a different Emma coming in, and we continue the inspiring conversations. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful day with love and compassion from me. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.